Let's start with something most people never understand. When an avoidant looks at you, they don't just see a partner, they see depth. They see emotional intensity. They see someone who feels things fully, and that alone changes the entire dynamic. You have to understand something about the avoidant psyche. Avoidance is not the absence of emotion, it's the fear of being overwhelmed by it. It's a nervous system that learned at some point that closeness equals danger, that dependency equals loss, that vulnerability equals pain. So when they encounter you, someone emotionally present, expressive, intuitive, it does something profound. It activates both attraction and threat at the same time. They are drawn to your depth because it represents something they secretly long for, real connection. But they are also unsettled by it because it represents something they don't know how to sustain. Your emotional intelligence exposes their emotional limitations. You ask meaningful questions. You notice subtle shifts. You feel energy changes before words are spoken. You want to talk things through, not sweep them under the rug. To you, this is normal. To them, this feels intense. And here's the critical psychological truth. Depth destabilizes avoidance because avoidance survives in distance. It survives in ambiguity. It survives in the shallow end of emotional experience. But when you bring depth into the room, you remove their hiding places. You're not dramatic. You're not too much. You're simply present. And presence demands participation. Think about it philosophically. Human beings grow through exposure. When we are confronted with a higher standard, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, we either rise or we retreat. The avoidant often retreats, not because the standard is unfair, but because rising requires confronting their own unprocessed fears. Your capacity to feel threatens their strategy of not feeling. And that's where the tension begins. They may admire your empathy. They may compliment your emotional maturity. They may even say, I've never connected with someone like this before. And they mean it. But what they don't say is, what's happening internally, I don't know how to handle this, because depth requires reciprocity. You can't fake emotional fluency for long. You can't perform vulnerability without eventually having to actually be vulnerable. And when the moment comes, when real closeness is required, their nervous system interprets it as risk. So they pull back, not because you overwhelm them with flaws, but because you overwhelm them with truth. There's something else happening beneath the surface. When someone meets a person who operates at a higher emotional frequency, it creates a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable. They reflect what is present and what is absent. Your self-awareness highlights their avoidance. Your openness highlights their guardedness. Your willingness to lean in highlights their instinct to withdraw. And here's the part you must internalize. Their discomfort is not a verdict on your value. It's evidence of it. Low depth does not intimidate avoidance. High depth does. And if you are someone who feels deeply, loves deeply, and speaks honestly, you are not the problem in that dynamic. You are simply operating at a level they have not yet integrated within themselves. This is why they oscillate. They move closer, then farther. They test the waters, then retreat to shore. Because part of them wants what you represent, and part of them fears what it would demand of them. Emotional depth is a form of power. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it's steady, it's grounded, it's sovereign, and sovereign energy forces a choice, evolve, or escape. So if an avoidant pulls away from your depth, understand this clearly. You did not scare them because you were too much. You revealed what they were not ready to become, and that is not rejection, that is reflection. Now let's go deeper. When an avoidant looks at you, they don't just see emotional depth. They see standards. They see structure. They see someone who knows what they will and will not tolerate. And this is where something very subtle begins to happen inside them. Standards are not loud. They're not aggressive. They don't require ultimatums. True standards are quiet. They're embodied. They show up in the way you carry yourself, the way you respond to inconsistency, the way you don't chase when someone pulls away. And to a psychologically secure person, that energy feels grounding. But to an avoidant, especially one carrying hidden shame, it feels like pressure. Not because you're demanding, but because you're clear. Clarity forces self-evaluation. You see, avoidant attachment is often built on a fragile sense of adequacy. On the surface, they appear independent, self-sufficient, even confident. But underneath, there's often a deep fear of not being enough, not emotionally equipped enough, not consistent enough, not capable of sustaining intimacy long term. So when they encounter someone with high relational standards, it activates that fear. You don't beg for reassurance. You don't tolerate hot and cold behavior. You don't shrink yourself to make someone comfortable, and that silently communicates something powerful. If you want access to me, you must show up fully. Now here's the paradox. Avoidants are often attracted to high-value individuals. They admire strength. They admire self-respect. They admire emotional intelligence. But admiration and capacity are two different things. They may want you, but wanting you means meeting you. And meeting you requires consistency, accountability, and emotional presence. That's where the pressure begins. Because standards eliminate ambiguity, they remove the gray area where avoidance often feels safest. When you have clear boundaries, there's no room for half investment. There's no room for disappearing acts followed by charming returns. There's no room for emotional minimalism, and that forces a decision: rise or retreat. Psychologically, when someone feels they may not be able to meet a standard, they protect their ego by disengaging. It's easier to say, "This isn't what I want," than to admit, "I'm not sure I can handle what this requires." It's easier to label you as too intense, too serious, or too demanding than to confront the internal anxiety that says, "What if I fail here?" Your standards confront them with responsibility, and responsibility feels heavy. Someone who equates intimacy with entrapment. But understand this clearly: standards are not control, they are self-respect in action. You are not asking them to change who they are. You are asking them to show up as who they claim to be. And when there's a gap between identity and behavior, tension arises. This is where many people make a mistake. When the avoidant pulls back, they lower their standards, they soften boundaries, they over-explain, they over-give, they try to make themselves more digestible. But high value never chases acceptance. High value evaluates alignment. Your standards are not barriers. They are filters. They protect your time, your energy, your emotional investment. And when someone feels pressure around your standards, it doesn't automatically mean you are rigid. It may simply mean they are not prepared. Here's the philosophical truth. We are attracted to what we aspire to, but we are intimidated by what we doubt we can sustain. If an avoidant feels small in the presence of your self-respect, that is not evidence you should shrink. It is evidence that your presence exposes the gap between who they are and who they would need to become. And that gap can feel unbearable to someone unwilling to grow. So if they distance themselves when they realize you won't settle, don't misinterpret it as rejection. It may simply be recognition. They see your standards. They feel the weight of them. And instead of rising to the throne, they choose to step away from it. Never lower your crown to make someone comfortable with their fear. Now let's talk about something even more confronting for the avoidant: your stability. When they look at you, they don't just see depth. They don't just see standards. They see consistency. They see someone emotionally regulated, someone who doesn't swing wildly between extremes, someone whose presence feels grounded. And to a secure person, that kind of stability feels like home. But to an avoidant, it can feel like a loss of control. You have to understand how the avoidant nervous system is wired. Autonomy equals safety. Distance equals regulation. The ability to leave, emotionally or physically, is what keeps their internal world manageable. Control in their mind prevents vulnerability. Now enter you. You're steady. You communicate directly. You don't create chaos to feel alive. You don't withdraw to gain power. Your consistency removes games from the equation. And games are often how avoidants regulate intimacy. When someone is inconsistent, the avoidant can relax into unpredictability. There's space, there's ambiguity, there's no clear expectation of permanence. But when someone is stable, truly stable, it introduces something far more serious: reliability. And reliability implies continuity. Continuity implies commitment. Commitment implies exposure. This is where the fear activates, because stability removes their exit strategy. Think about it psychologically. If you are erratic, they can justify staying emotionally detached. If you are unsure, they can stay unsure. But if you are clear, grounded, and consistent, there's no chaos to hide behind. You're offering something solid, and solidity forces them to confront a terrifying question: if this becomes real, can I handle it? Your stability is not suffocating, it's anchoring. But to someone who equates closeness with engulfment. An anchor can feel like a weight. You don't threaten their independence by controlling them. You threaten it by not needing to control them. That's powerful, because when you're emotionally stable, you're not chasing reassurance. You're not panicking at minor distance. You're not trying to force closeness. You simply remain centered. And centered energy is immovable. That immovability can feel intimidating to someone who subconsciously relies on shifting dynamics to feel safe. Avoidants often maintain a subtle upper hand by staying slightly detached. But when you are secure, there is no leverage to gain. You're not trying to possess them, you're inviting them. An invitation requires voluntary participation. Here's the deeper philosophical layer. Chaos gives the illusion of freedom. Stability requires responsibility. If everything is unpredictable, no one has to fully show up. But when something is stable, when someone is consistent, the stakes become real. The relationship is no longer a game of pursuit and retreat. It becomes a choice. And choice is heavy, because if they choose you, they must choose presence. They must choose vulnerability. They must choose accountability over escape. Your stability shines a light on their coping mechanisms. It exposes the ways they use distance to self-soothe. It highlights how they equate closeness with loss of identity. And instead of dismantling those patterns, many avoidants choose the familiar comfort of detachment. They say they need space. But what they often mean is, I don't know how to exist in something this steady without feeling trapped. Let me be clear, your stability is not a cage. It is structure. And structure is what builds empires. When someone cannot tolerate stability, it is not because stability is wrong. It is because chaos feels more familiar than peace. If they pull away from your consistency, do not interpret it as a sign that you should become less grounded. Do not destabilize yourself to match their discomfort. Because the truth is this, your stability doesn't limit them. It removes their hiding places. And anyone who fears a solid foundation is not ready to build something that lasts. Never confuse someone's fear of commitment with your inability to inspire it. Now we move into something even more unsettling for the avoidant, being fully seen. When they look at you, they don't just see depth, standards, or stability. They see perception. They see awareness. They sense that you are not interacting with their surface. You are reading the layers underneath. And that changes everything. Most avoidants survive relationally by operating through a carefully constructed persona. Competent, independent, unbothered, self-contained. They have mastered the art of appearing emotionally low maintenance. It's efficient. It keeps them in control. It prevents too many intrusive questions. But you don't relate to personas. You relate to patterns. You notice when their tone shifts slightly. You notice when they withdraw after a moment of closeness. You notice the difference between I'm busy and I'm overwhelmed. And you don't attack it, you simply register it. That awareness alone can feel exposing, because when someone senses they are being truly seen, the illusion of control weakens. Masks only work when no one quests. Ions them. Defense mechanisms only work when they go undetected. You are not trying to dismantle them, you are simply perceptive. But perception creates vulnerability. There is a psychological principle at play here. We feel safest when we believe we can control how others perceive us. When that control is threatened, anxiety rises. For the avoidant, whose identity is often built around self-sufficiency, being accurately read can feel like emotional nakedness. And nakedness feels dangerous. You might say something simple like, it seems like you pull away when things start to feel close. You're not accusing, you're observing. But to them, that observation lands heavily. It signals that you see the pattern, and once a pattern is named, it cannot hide as easily. This is why avoidants often retreat after moments of intense connection. When intimacy deepens, their true emotional landscape becomes more visible. And visibility triggers the old narrative, if someone sees all of me, they might reject me. If they see my fears, my inconsistencies, my shutdowns, I will lose control. So instead of risking that exposure, they create distance. Distance restores the mask. Distance restores autonomy. Distance restores emotional privacy. But here's the paradox. They are drawn to you because you are authentic. And authenticity naturally seeks truth. You don't want a performance. You want presence. You don't want charm. You want congruence. And congruence requires alignment between who someone says they are and how they show up. When that alignment is off, you feel it. You don't need dramatic confrontations. You don't need proof. you feel the subtle dissonance, and your LM awareness communicates something powerful. I see what's happening. For someone who has spent years avoiding their own inner world, that level of perception can feel like standing in front of a mirror they didn't consent to. Mirrors are uncomfortable. They reflect not only strength, but fracture. Your ability to see through them does not mean you are critical. It means you are conscious. And consciousness invites growth, but growth requires humility. If they are not ready to confront themselves, they will interpret your awareness as pressure rather than partnership. So they withdraw, not because you judge them, but because you recognize them. Understand this deeply. Being seen is one of the most intimate human experiences possible. It is also one of the most terrifying for someone who has built safety around emotional concealment. You are not dangerous because you are demanding. You are dangerous because you are accurate. And accuracy dismantles illusion. If they run from that, do not dim your perception. Do not pretend you don't see what you see. Do not abandon your clarity to protect their comfort, because the right partner will not fear being seen by you. They will feel relieved. Never apologize for your awareness. The one who is meant to sit beside royalty will not fear the light. They will stand confidently within it. We arrive at something deeper than attraction, deeper than fear. We arrive at worthiness. When an avoidant looks at you and sees royalty, what they're really seeing is self-possession. They see someone who knows who they are, someone who does not beg for validation, someone who does not collapse when faced with distance. So, Mione who carries themselves with quiet certainty. Royalty is not arrogance. It is alignment. It's the internal decision that your value is not up for negotiation. And here's what's difficult for many avoidants: beneath the independence, beneath the cool detachment, beneath the I don't need anyone narrative, there is often unprocessed shame. Shame is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It hides behind perfectionism. It hides behind emotional unavailability. It hides behind chronic busyness and intellectualization. But at its core, shame whispers one sentence: if people really knew me, they would find me lacking. So when they encounter someone who embodies self-worth, not performative confidence, but grounded worth, it activates that whisper. You don't chase them. You don't over-explain your boundaries. You don't overcompensate when they pull back. You don't compete for position in your own life. That kind of energy forces comparison, and comparison awakens insecurity. If they feel internally fragmented, your wholeness becomes confronting. If they doubt their ability to sustain intimacy, your relational strength feels intimidating. If they secretly question whether they are capable of being consistent, your consistency feels like a spotlight. It's not that you demand perfection, it's that you represent coherence. And coherence exposes inner conflict. Psychologically, when someone feels unworthy, they will often sabotage proximity to what they desire most, because proximity threatens exposure. If they stay close to you, they must confront the gap between how they see themselves and how you see them. You might see potential. You might see goodness. You might see strength beneath their defenses. But if they do not see it within themselves, your belief in them can feel heavy. Royalty energy does not shrink to reassure insecurity. It stands upright. It remains steady. It does not plead to be chosen. And that steadiness can trigger a profound internal question inside the avoidant. Am I enough for this? Now understand this clearly. That question is not about your standards alone. It's about their self-concept. If someone carries unresolved shame, being loved by someone high value can feel undeserved. And when something feels undeserved, the instinct is to push it away before it can be taken. It's self-protection through preemptive loss. They may say they need freedom. They may say they feel pressured. They may say the timing isn't right. But often beneath those words is something far more vulnerable. I don't know if I can hold this, because to sit beside royalty requires presence. It requires integrity. It requires emotional availability. It requires stepping into one's own maturity. And if someone has avoided that inner work, your presence becomes a call to rise. Some will answer that call. Others will retreat from. This is why you must never interpret their withdrawal as evidence that you were too confident, too self-assured, too strong. Strength does not repel the capable. It reveals the unprepared. Royalty is not about status. It is about sovereignty. It is knowing that your worth is intrinsic, not conditional. It is refusing to audition for a role in someone else's uncertainty. It is standing firm even when someone else questions their ability to stand beside you. If they walk away from your throne, it does not mean the throne was too high. It means they doubted their ability to sit on it. Never abdicate your crown to accommodate someone else's insecurity. And now we come to the final layer, the part most people never consider. When the avoidant looks at you beyond the depth, beyond the standards, beyond the stability, beyond the perception, beyond the royalty, they see possibility. They see what this could be, and that is precisely what terrifies them. Understand something fundamental about human psychology. It is not failure that scares most people. It is transformation, because transformation requires the death of an old identity. And for the avoidant, that old identity is built around control, distance, and self-reliance. When they encounter you, they glimpse a different reality, a relationship that is calm but passionate, intimate but not chaotic, deep but not destructive. They feel what secure connection could be like. And for a moment, sometimes a brief, unguarded moment, they lean in. They experience what it feels like to be met without games, to be understood without manipulation, to be wanted without being chased. And something inside them softens. But softness requires surrender, and surrender feels like loss of control. Here is the paradox. They know your value. They recognize your rarity. They are not blind to what you bring. In fact, that recognition is part of the anxiety. Because if you are rare, losing you would hurt. And if losing you would hurt, that means they would have to care deeply. And caring deeply has always been the risk. So they stand at a crossroads. On one side is growth, vulnerability, accountability, emotional exposure, healing old wounds. On the other side is familiarity, distance, autonomy, emotional self-protection. Growth promises connection. Familiarity promises safety. Most people say they want connection, but the nervous system chooses safety. This is why avoidants often leave relationships that were healthy but challenging. Not toxic, not dramatic. Challenging in the sense that they required evolution. You represent evolution. Being with you would mean communicating instead of withdrawing. It would mean staying in the conversation when discomfort arises. It would mean tolerating closeness without interpreting it as entrapment. It would mean confronting the internal narratives that say intimacy equals loss of freedom. That is not a small shift. That is a restructuring of identity. And identity shifts are terrifying. So when they pull away, it is rarely because they didn't see your value. It is often because they saw it too clearly. They understood, perhaps subconsciously, that keeping you would require becoming someone more emotionally available than they have ever been. And that is a threshold moment. Some people cross thresholds. Others circle them for years. You cannot drag someone across a threshold of growth. You cannot love someone into evolution if they are committed to their comfort zone. You cannot convince someone to trade familiar loneliness for unfamiliar intimacy. That choice must be self-initiated. Here is the philosophical truth. Potential is both inspiring and destabilizing. It reveals what is possible and what must change to achieve it. When they see you, they see a higher level of relational experience. They see what partnership could look like at its healthiest. They see loyalty without desperation, power without control, love without chaos. And if they are not ready to rise to that level, they will retreat to what feels manageable. That retreat is not a judgment of your worth. It is a confession of their limits. So if an avoidant walks away from something that could have been extraordinary, understand this. They did not leave because you were lacking. They left because becoming capable of loving you fully required courage they had not yet cultivated. And here is what you must carry forward. Never shrink your potential to make someone comfortable with their fear. The right person will not be terrified by what you could build together. They will be inspired to build it. So when you step back and look at the entire picture, the depth, the standards, the stability, the awareness, the royalty, the possibility, you beg in to understand something powerful. The avoidant did not see weakness in you. They saw strength. They did not see neediness. They saw emotional capacity. They did not see someone chasing. They saw someone choosing. And that changes the narrative completely. For too long, people internalize the withdrawal of an avoidant as proof that they were too much or not enough. But what you've seen today is the opposite. You were too real for someone committed to distance. You were too grounded for someone attached to chaos. You were too self-aware for someone invested in avoidance. You were too sovereign for someone still negotiating their own worth. This is not about superiority. It's about readiness. Two people can recognize value and still not be aligned in capacity. Attraction is not the same as preparedness. Chemistry is not the same as emotional infrastructure. And love, without the ability to sustain intimacy, collapses under its own weight. The avoidant sees your value, often more clearly than you realize. But seeing value and being able to hold it are two very different things. And here is the truth you must leave with. You are not responsible for shrinking your depth to make someone comfortable. You are not responsible for lowering your standards to avoid triggering insecurity. You are not responsible for destabilizing yourself to match someone else's fear of stability. You are not responsible for dimming your perception so someone can keep their mask. And you are certainly not responsible for stepping down from your throne because someone doubts their ability to sit beside you. Growth requires courage. Intimacy requires maturity. And secure love requires two people willing to confront themselves. If someone walks away from you because your presence demands evolution, let them walk, not with bitterness, not with arrogance, but with clarity. Because the one who is meant for you will not feel threatened by your depth, they will meet it. They will not feel pressured by your standards, they will respect them. They will not feel trapped by your stability, they will build with it. They will not fear being seen by you. They will feel understood. They will not question whether they deserve your royalty. They will rise to it, and that is the shift. This was never about convincing someone to choose you. It was about recognizing that you are already chosen by your own standards, your own growth, your own integrity. Royalty does not chase validation. Royalty stands. So if an avoidant saw your value and walked away, understand this clearly. You were not too much. You were the mirror, the standard, the foundation, the light, and the future they were not yet brave enough to claim. Hold your crown. The right one will not run from it. They will walk toward it.